Millionaire freezes when he sees a girl with a birthmark like his. Sir, are you my father? Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Rain pattered against the windows of Brexton Cafe as Blake Anderson loosened his tie with a weary sigh. Another day, another multi-million-dollar deal closed. Success had become routine, almost boring. At 38, he had everything money could buy, yet something essential remained, missing. Blake glanced at his watch, 7:30 p.m. The boardroom tension still clung to him like the dampness outside. He needed this moment of peace before returning to his empty penthouse apartment. The usual Mr. Anderson? The barista smiled, already preparing his Americano. He nodded absently, his attention caught by something through the rain-streaked window. A small figure huddled under the cafe's awning. A child no more than 6 sitting alone on the wet sidewalk. Something about her solitude bothered him. Children shouldn't be alone at this hour, especially in this weather. Hold that coffee, he told the barista heading outside. The little girl looked up as his shadow fell across her. Large brown eyes studied him with surprising composure for someone so young. Her clothes were neat but obviously worn, her small backpack clutched protectively against her chest. "Are you okay?" Blake asked, crouching to her level. "Where are your parents?" "I'm waiting for my grandpa," she replied confidently. "He's late sometimes." Blake nodded, noticing how she tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, a gesture so familiar it made his chest tighten oddly. "I'm Blake. What's your name?" "Madison Parker," she said, extending her small hand with adult-like formality. Parker. The name hit him like a physical blow, but surely it was just coincidence. "Well, Madison, it's getting dark. How about we wait inside where it's warm? I'll buy you hot chocolate while we wait for your grandpa." She hesitated before nodding, gathering her backpack. As she reached for his offered hand, her sleeve pulled back, revealing a distinctive crescent-shaped birthmark on her wrist. Blake froze, his breath catching. That birthmark, identical to his own, identical to his mother's, was a rare family trait. "That's an interesting birthmark," he managed, his voice suddenly hoarse. "My mom had the same one," Madison said simply. "I never met her. She died when I was born." The world seemed to tilt beneath Blake's feet. "Your mother's name, was it Jessica?" Madison's eyes widened with surprise. "Yes! Did you know my mommy?" Blake steadied himself against the wall, memories flooding back. Jessica Parker, his first love, the woman he'd lost touch with after college. "Madison, when's your birthday?" "February 12th, she answered, exactly 9 months after he'd last seen Jessica. "My daddy's name was Blake too," Madison continued innocently. "That's what Grandma told me, but he went away before I was born." In that moment, standing in the rain with a child he never knew existed, Blake Anderson's carefully constructed world shattered completely. Blake stared at the DNA results on his desk, the clinical confirmation of what he'd suspected since seeing Madison's crescent birthmark 2 weeks ago. 99.9% probability of paternity. The words blurred as he ran his hands through his hair. "This is impossible," he muttered, though the evidence was irrefutable. His assistant Rachel knocked softly before entering his office. The investigator called. He found Jessica's death certificate and, she hesitated, Madison's birth certificate. "You're listed as the father." Blake's throat tightened. Why didn't she tell me? We may have broken up, but this. According to her parents, she tried. "They said she called your office dozens of times." Blake frowned. "I never received any messages." Rachel placed a folder on his desk. "I checked our records from that period. There were indeed calls from Jessica, but they were all marked handled by your Uncle Harold." Blake's stomach dropped. Harold had been his mentor, guiding Blake's career after his parents died. The idea that his uncle might have deliberately kept Madison from him seemed unthinkable. "There's more," Rachel continued. "I found these in the archived files." She slid out several envelopes addressed in Jessica's handwriting. All unopened, all marked "Return to sender" in handwriting Blake recognized as Harold's. He intercepted her letters? Blake whispered, fury building inside him. It seems so. And there's something else. Harold restructured your inheritance around that time, making him executor until you turned 40 or... Rachel paused. Or what? Or until you had a family of your own. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Harold had controlled Blake's substantial inheritance for years. A child would have ended that arrangement immediately. Blake stood abruptly. I need to see my uncle now. Harold's corner office exuded power, much like the man himself. At 65, he remained imposing, his silver hair perfectly styled, his expression calculating as Blake entered. To what do I owe this unexpected visit? Harold asked smoothly. Blake tossed the DNA results onto Harold's desk. Did you know? Harold glanced at the paper, his expression unchanging. About your indiscretion with that Parker girl? Ancient history. Not so ancient. I have a daughter. Harold's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. A regrettable situation, I'm sure, but hardly relevant to the company. You kept her from me, Blake said, his voice dangerously quiet. You hid Jessica's calls, returned her letters. Why? Don't be dramatic. You were 25, poised to take over as CEO. A child would have derailed everything we worked for. Everything you worked for, Blake corrected. You had no right. Harold leaned forward. I protected your future. That girl was never good enough for you or this family. Her child would only be a distraction. Her name is Madison, Blake said, through clenched teeth. And she's my daughter. Be reasonable. Harold's voice hardened. What exactly do you plan to do? Play daddy to some girl you've never met? You know nothing about raising a child. Blake turned to leave, pausing at the door. I'm meeting with my lawyers tomorrow. I'm filing for custody. Harold's laugh was cold. You really think a workaholic bachelor with no parenting experience stands a chance? Don't throw away everything for some misplaced guilt. Watch me, Blake replied, closing the door behind him. The Parker residence was modest, a small craftsman house with faded blue paint and a well-tended garden. Blake sat in his luxury car, palms sweating as he rehearsed what to say. This wasn't a business negotiation, this was his daughter. After 3 deep breaths, he finally approached the door. An elderly man with kind eyes answered. Robert Parker, Jessica's father. Mr. Parker, I'm Blake Anderson. I believe you're expecting me. Robert's expression was guarded but not unkind. Madison's excited to meet you properly. She hasn't stopped talking about the man with the same birthmark. Inside, Martha Parker sat stiffly on the couch, her disapproval evident in every line of her face. Blake couldn't blame her. In her eyes, he was the man who abandoned her pregnant daughter. Mrs. Parker. He nodded respectfully. You look just like your pictures, Martha said flatly. Jessica kept them all. Blake's heart twisted at the mention of Jessica's name. Before he could respond, Madison bounded into the room, stopping abruptly when she saw him. You came, she said, surprise coloring her voice. I promised I would. Blake crouched to her level. I brought something for you. He handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a silver locket containing a photo of Jessica he'd found in his old college albums. That's my mommy, Madison whispered, touching the picture reverently. It is. Blake agreed, throat tight. I thought you might like to have it. Madison studied him intently. Are you really my dad? The directness of her question caught him off guard. Yes, Madison, I am. Where were you before? No accusation in her voice, just genuine curiosity. Blake glanced at the Parkers, then back to Madison. I didn't know about you, sweetheart. If I had, I would have been here, I promise. As Madison showed Blake her room, his phone buzzed repeatedly. 12 missed calls from Harold. He silenced it. She has your smile, Robert observed when Madison disappeared to fetch her drawings. She has Jessica's eyes, Blake replied softly. Robert nodded. Jessica always said you'd come back someday, even at the end. The words felt like a knife to Blake's chest. I would have if I'd known. Well, you're here now, Robert said. Question is, are you staying? Before Blake could answer, his phone lit up with a text from Rachel. Emergency. Harold filed legal injunction claiming guardianship conflict. Lawyers waiting at office. Martha appeared in the doorway. Your real life is calling, Mr. Anderson. Madison doesn't need another disappointment. Blake pocketed his phone. This is my real life now, Mrs. Parker. I'm not going anywhere. As if summoned by his words, Madison returned, her smile so like his own. Can you come back tomorrow? She asked hopefully. Blake took her small hand in his. Tomorrow and every day. After that, if you'll let me. For the first time in years, he knew exactly where he belonged. Daddy, you're doing it wrong, Madison giggled, watching Blake struggle with her hair ties. His fingers, skilled at signing multi-million-dollar contracts, fumbled with the simple task of creating pigtails. Sorry, sweetheart. I've never done this before, Blake admitted, attempting once more to secure her dark curls. 3 weeks into his new role as Madison's father, Blake was learning that business acumen counted for nothing in the world of parenting. Bedtime routines, school lunches, and now hairstyling. Each day brought new challenges. Perhaps I can help, a voice offered from the classroom doorway. Blake turned to see Madison's teacher, Olivia Chen, watching with amusement. Morning drop-off had become the most stressful part of his day. Would you mind? He asked gratefully. With practiced ease, Olivia fixed Madison's hair while explaining the technique. Blake watched intently, determined to learn. There you go, Madison. Why don't you join the others at the reading corner? Olivia suggested. Once Madison was out of earshot, Olivia turned to Blake. How are you holding up? Is it that obvious I'm drowning? He asked with a self-deprecating smile. All new parents struggle, she assured him, even those who've had 6 years to practice. Blake's phone buzzed. Another text from Harold. He ignored it. Listen. Olivia lowered her voice. Madison's been drawing pictures of you in art class. She told everyone her daddy came back from a long trip. That's progress. A small but significant victory that made Blake's chest swell with pride. Thank you for telling me that, he said sincerely. Parents' night is Thursday, Olivia mentioned. I know it's short notice. I'll be there, Blake promised immediately. As he left the school, his lawyer called. Harold's pushing for a psychological evaluation, claiming your sudden interest in Madison is a midlife crisis that could harm her stability. Blake's jaw tightened. He's getting desperate. There's more. He's scheduled an emergency board meeting, suggesting your family situation is affecting company performance. Back at his office, Rachel waited with a stack of files. I've rescheduled your meetings to accommodate Madison's school hours and found these. She handed him parenting books and information on local father-daughter activities. Blake was momentarily speechless. Rachel, this is... Thank you. One more thing, she hesitated. Harold's been meeting with Jessica's ex-boyfriend from after you two broke up. I don't know why, but it can't be good. Blake nodded grimly. Learning the rules of fatherhood was challenging enough. Doing it while fighting an increasingly hostile uncle was exhausting. That evening, as he tucked Madison into bed, she asked drowsily, Are you going to go away again? No, Madison, Blake said firmly, kissing her forehead. I'm not going anywhere. For the first time since discovering her existence, Blake felt like Madison might actually believe him. Blake found the box tucked away in Jessica's old room, forgotten in the corner of the Parkers' attic. Inside were dozens of letters, all addressed to him, all unsent. We didn't know about these, Martha explained, her previous coldness softening slightly. Jessica must have written them during her pregnancy. With trembling hands, Blake opened the first letter, dated 8 years ago. Blake, I have news that will change everything, Jessica had written. I'm carrying our child. I've called your office 17 times. Your uncle says you're too busy to speak with me. I don't believe him. Each letter revealed more of Jessica's journey, her determination to reach him, her hope that he would come back, her love for their unborn child. The final letter, written just days before her death, broke him completely. I still believe you. Would have wanted to know her. I've named her Madison. She has your birthmark, Blake. Someday I hope she finds you. Grief and rage warred inside him. Harold hadn't just kept him from his daughter. He'd stolen Jessica's last years from him too. At his office, Rachel waited with grim news. Harold leaked documents to the press suggesting you're pursuing Madison for tax benefits. It's all over the business blogs. Blake's phone rang. Madison's school. Mr. Anderson, there's been an incident, Olivia explained. Some children were teasing Madison about the news articles. She's quite upset. When Blake arrived, Madison sat alone, tears streaking her face. Tommy said you only want me for money, she whispered. Is that true? Blake knelt beside her. Never. You're the most important person in my life. But you're always working, and you get mad when I mess up. The words stung with truth. Despite his intentions, Blake had been impatient when Madison spilled juice on important papers, distracted during their time together by constant work emergencies. I'm still learning how to be a good dad, he admitted. But I promise to do better. That evening, Harold appeared at Blake's door uninvited. This charade has gone far enough, Harold said, dropping a folder on the table. Jessica was seeing someone else when she got pregnant. There's a chance Madison isn't even yours. Blake's blood ran cold. The DNA test can be manipulated, Harold interrupted. The Parkers are desperate for financial support. Think about it. When Harold left, doubt crept in despite Blake's efforts to ignore it. Why had Jessica never mentioned anyone else? His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I know the truth about Jessica. Meet me tomorrow. Alone. Attached was a photo of Jessica with another man, dated during the time they were supposedly together. Blake stared at the image, the ground shifting beneath him once again. Everything he thought he knew about Jessica, about Madison, about his newfound purpose, suddenly none of it felt certain anymore. The cafe where Blake agreed to meet the mysterious messenger was nearly empty. A man approached, mid-40s, disheveled, with a hungry look in his eyes. You must be Blake Anderson, he said, sliding into the seat. I'm Mark Stevens. I dated Jessica briefly after you two split. Blake studied him warily. You sent the photo. Harold paid me to, Mark admitted bluntly. 10 grand to say I was with Jessica when she got pregnant. He has more photos, all doctored. Blake's relief was immediate, followed by disgust. Why are you telling me this? Because Jessica deserved better, Mark said quietly. She never got over you. Even when we dated, your name was always on her lips. When she found out she was pregnant, she ended things with me immediately. Did you know her when she had Madison? Mark nodded. I was there the day she died. Her last words were about you, that she was finally going to find you, introduce you to your daughter. The revelation hit Blake like a physical blow. All these years, he'd thought Jessica had deliberately kept Madison from him, when she'd been fighting to reach him until her last breath. After Mark left, Blake drove straight to the company headquarters where the board meeting was already in progress. Harold was mid-presentation when Blake entered. Clearly distracted by personal matters, the company needs stable leadership. I'd like to address the board, Blake interrupted. Harold's face reddened. This is highly irregular. I'm still CEO, Blake reminded him coolly. Facing the board members, Blake made the decision that had been forming since he first saw Madison's birthmark. Effective immediately, I'm taking a 3-month leave of absence. My daughter needs me, and I need time to be the father she deserves, Harold scoffed. This proves my point exactly. No, Uncle, Blake continued. It proves I finally understand what matters. For years I've put this company first, missed holidays, relationships, life itself. I won't miss being Madison's father, too. The boardroom erupted in murmurs. Harold slammed his fist on the table. You're throwing away everything your father built. I'm saving what matters most, Blake countered. This company will be here in 3 months. My daughter's childhood won't wait. Later that evening, Blake sat with Robert Parker on the porch swing, the old man's arthritis-twisted hands clutching a worn photo album. Jessica kept a diary, Robert said, opening to a page where a small key was taped. She locked it away before she died. Said if anything happened to her, we should give this to you someday. The small diary, retrieved from a safety deposit box, contained Jessica's most private thoughts, her unwavering love for Blake, her determination that Madison would know her father. The final entry, dated the day before she died from complications during birth, read simply, "Tomorrow I'll have our daughter in my arms, and soon after I'll find you, Blake. We'll be a family at last." As Blake closed the diary, his phone rang. It was his lawyer. "Harold has filed for emergency guardianship of Madison, claiming you're mentally unfit. The hearing is set for next week." The battle lines were drawn. Blake wasn't just fighting for his daughter anymore. He was fighting for the future Jessica had died believing in. "Higher, higher!" Madison squealed as Blake pushed her on the swing, her laughter carrying across the park. These Saturday morning outings had become their ritual over the past month, a simple pleasure that neither took for granted. Blake checked his watch. No urgent calls, no meetings. For the first time in his career, work wasn't his priority. The leave of absence had been the right decision, despite Harold's continued legal maneuvers. "Watch me jump," Madison called, launching herself from the swing with fearless abandon. Blake's heart leaped to his throat until she landed safely, grinning triumphantly. "Careful, sweetheart," he cautioned, though he couldn't help smiling at her adventurous spirit, so like Jessica's. "You worry too much," said a voice behind him. Blake turned to find a woman watching them, her expression warm with recognition. "Sarah Williams," she introduced herself. "I was Jessica's best friend." Recognition dawned. "From the photos in Jessica's room," Sarah nodded. "I've been hoping to meet you. The Parkers told me you're fighting for Madison." They sat on a bench while Madison played nearby, Sarah sharing stories that filled crucial gaps in Blake's understanding of Jessica's final years. "She created this memory box," Sarah explained, handing him a small package. "For Madison's important milestones, Jessica recorded videos, wrote letters for her birthdays, graduation, even her wedding someday." Blake's throat tightened. "She thought of everything. She never doubted you'd find each other eventually," Sarah said softly, even when everyone told her to move on. Later that afternoon, Blake and Madison sat surrounded by Jessica's memories, photos, trinkets, and recordings that brought her presence into the room. "Mom was pretty," Madison observed, touching a photo reverently. "The most beautiful person I've ever known," Blake agreed, inside and out. They watched a video Jessica had recorded shortly before Madison's birth, her voice strong despite her obvious fatigue. "Madison, my sweet girl, if you're watching this, know that you are so loved. Your father would have adored you as much as I do. Find him someday." Madison looked up at Blake, her eyes shining with tears and something else understanding. "She wanted us to be together," she said simply. "More than anything," Blake confirmed. That evening, as he tucked her into bed, Madison studied him thoughtfully. "I made something for you," she said, pulling a drawing from under her pillow. The crayon artwork showed 3 figures, a tall man, a little girl, and a woman surrounded by stars. "That's you, me, and Mom watching from heaven," Madison explained. Blake swallowed hard. "It's perfect." As he turned to switch off the light, Madison's voice stopped him. "Good night, Dad." 3 simple words that shifted his entire world into perfect alignment. "Good night, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Outside Madison's door, his phone buzzed with a text from his lawyer. "Harold withdrawing guardianship petition. Victory." Blake smiled, tucking the phone away. The real victory was sleeping peacefully in the room behind him, finally calling him Dad. Blake stared at the quarterly reports, the numbers swimming before his eyes. 3 a.m., and he was still working, desperately trying to save the Miller account that had mysteriously started to unravel during his absence. His phone buzzed, an urgent email from the board. 3 major clients had threatened to withdraw their business, citing instability in leadership. Harold's fingerprints were all over this. The kitchen light flicked on, revealing Madison in her pajamas, clutching the stuffed elephant he'd given her. "Why are you still awake?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. Blake closed his laptop. "Just some work, sweetheart. What's wrong?" "I had the dream again, about Mom." Blake pulled her onto his lap, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. These nightmares had started after Harold had sent a reporter to Madison's school, the resulting article questioning whether a workaholic bachelor could provide proper care. Grandpa's coughing got worse, Madison whispered. Grandma was crying. Blake's stomach tightened. Robert's health had deteriorated rapidly in recent weeks. Pneumonia, the doctors said, but Blake suspected. The stress of Harold's constant legal maneuvers was taking its toll. "We'll visit them tomorrow," Blake promised. Morning brought more complications. Olivia called as Blake was making breakfast. "There's a social worker here," she said, her voice tense, asking questions about Madison's home life. Blake's jaw clenched. "Harold, Blake, they're saying Madison seems distressed at school. You need to come in." At the school, the social worker, clearly primed by Harold, questioned Blake's ability to balance work and parenting. Olivia defended him fiercely, her hand occasionally brushing his in silent support. The contact sent unexpected warmth through him. Their growing closeness had been the one bright spot in recent weeks. "Thanks for having my back," Blake told her afterward. "Always," Olivia replied, her smile making his heart race in a way he hadn't felt since Jessica. That afternoon, Martha, Parker called in tears. Robert had been hospitalized. "They're saying it's his heart now," she sobbed. "Blake, we've been Madison's whole world. If something happens to Robert." The unspoken question hung in the air. Would Madison move in with Blake permanently? Blake arrived at the hospital to find Harold already there, speaking quietly with a doctor. "Trying to undermine me with the Parkers now?" Blake demanded once the doctor left. Harold's expression remained calm. "I'm genuinely concerned about Robert's health. Unlike you, I'm not using a child as a pawn." "You manipulated everything from the beginning," Blake hissed. "You kept me from Jessica, from Madison. And look at what's happening now that you're involved." Harold interrupted. "Robert's health failing, Madison having nightmares, your company losing millions." Blake flinched. Harold pressed on. "Face it, everyone was better off before you decided to play daddy." The doubt that Blake had been fighting crept back in. Was Harold right? Was he making everyone's lives worse? His phone chimed. The Miller account was officially pulling out. Millions in revenue gone. Everything was falling apart, and Blake wasn't sure how much longer he could hold it all together. The boardroom fell silent as Blake entered. 14 stern faces turned toward him. Harold at the head of the table, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. "Glad you could join us, Blake," Harold said coolly. "We were just discussing the company's future." Blake had rushed from the hospital, where Robert's condition had stabilized but remained serious. The emergency board meeting, called without his knowledge, felt like the final piece of Harold's elaborate chess game. "What's this about?" Blake demanded. The board chairman cleared his throat. "Given recent developments, we've voted to temporarily remove you as CEO, effective immediately." The words hit Blake like a physical blow. "On what grounds?" Harold slid a document across the table. "The Miller account's departure triggered a domino effect. We've lost 4 major clients. Stock is down 17%. Clients you pressured to leave," Blake countered, anger rising. "That's a serious accusation," Harold replied calmly. "Do you have proof?" Blake didn't, and they both knew it. A knock interrupted them. Blake's assistant Rachel entered, her face pale. "I'm sorry, but you need to see this," she whispered, handing Blake her tablet. On screen was a breaking news story. CEO's secret past. Blake Anderson abandoned pregnant girlfriend. Accompanying it was a fabricated email, allegedly from Blake, to Jessica, declining any responsibility for her pregnancy. "This is a lie," Blake said through clenched teeth. "I never wrote this." Harold feigned concern. "The timestamp matches when Jessica tried to reach you. Perhaps you've forgotten?" Before Blake could respond, his phone rang. Martha Parker. "The reporter showed us the email," she said, her voice brittle with anger. How could you? All this time pretending you didn't know. Martha, it's not true. We don't want you near Madison anymore. She cut him off. Robert and I are filing for permanent guardianship. The room spun around Blake. In one brutal stroke, he'd lost his company and potentially his daughter. Outside the boardroom, Olivia waited, her expression grave. The school received calls from concerned parents, she said quietly. The principal feels it would be best if you didn't attend the father-daughter dance tomorrow. You don't believe this garbage, do you? Blake asked desperately. Olivia's hesitation. Was answer enough? I want to believe you, Blake, but the evidence. Evidence Harold fabricated. I need to think about what's best for Madison, Olivia said, stepping back. Maybe we should take a step back from us, for now. By evening, Blake sat alone in his apartment, surrounded by the toys and books he'd bought for Madison's planned visits. His phone buzzed with a text from Martha. Madison's been crying since she heard the news. She doesn't understand why you lied. A knock at the door revealed Harold, looking almost sympathetic. I came to offer a solution, he said smoothly. Resign permanently as CEO, sign over your voting shares, and I'll make the story disappear. The Parkers will let you see Madison occasionally. Blake stared at his uncle, the man who had systematically dismantled his life. Why? Blake whispered. Why destroy everything I care about? Harold's facade cracked, revealing the bitterness beneath. Your father chose you over me despite my sacrifices. I built this company while he coddled you. Then he left everything to his precious son. As Harold left, Blake realized he'd lost everything. His company, Madison's trust, Olivia's support, and the future he'd begun to believe in. The photograph of Jessica stared back at him, her smile a painful reminder of all he'd failed to protect. Blake sat alone in his childhood home, a place he'd avoided for years. Dust sheets covered the furniture, memories lurked in every shadow. After losing everything, he'd retreated to the one place Harold couldn't touch, the modest house his parents had owned before his father's business success. A week had passed since his world imploded. No calls from Madison, no responses to his texts explaining the fabricated emails. His lawyer's attempts to counter Harold's narrative had met brick walls at every turn. Blake pulled out Jessica's diary, reading her words again, searching for something he might have missed. Her final entry still haunted him. We'll be a family at last. I failed you, he whispered. I failed Madison. He wandered through the silent rooms, eventually finding himself in his father's old study. The family photo on the desk showed happier times. Blake at 10, his parents smiling, Harold standing slightly apart, his expression unreadable. Had the resentment always been there? How had Blake never seen it? On impulse, he opened his father's desk drawer, finding old business files, family documents, and a sealed envelope addressed to him in his father's handwriting. Inside was a letter dated 2 days before his father's fatal heart attack. Blake, I fear Harold's influence on you is becoming unhealthy. He sees the company as his life's achievement, not a means to create meaning and value. Remember why we built this company, not for wealth or power, but to create something lasting, something that matters. Don't let ambition steal your chance at happiness. I've watched you follow Harold's path, putting success above relationships. Don't make my mistakes. I lost years with you pursuing what Harold convinced me was important. It wasn't. You are. Blake sank into his father's chair, the truth washing over him. He'd spent years becoming the man Harold wanted him to be. Driven, ruthless, alone. Exactly what his father had warned against. The doorbell broke his reverie. Rachel stood on the porch, clutching a thick folder. I've been worried about you, she said, stepping inside. And I found something. The folder contained evidence of Harold's manipulation. Intercepted communications between Jessica and Blake going back years. Financial records showing Harold's systematic appropriation of Blake's inheritance, and most damning, Harold's recent communications with the clients who'd abandoned Anderson Enterprises. How did you get these? Blake asked, stunned. Harold's Assistant likes me better than him, Rachel replied with a small smile. There was enough evidence to prove Harold's deception, potentially regain control of the company. Yet as Blake reviewed the documents, he realized something profound. The company no longer seemed important. I've been chasing the wrong things, he said softly. What matters then? Rachel asked. Madison. Being the father she deserves. Blake stood, sudden clarity filling him. Harold took everything because I valued the wrong things. My father tried to warn me. Jessica knew what mattered. She always did. He pulled out his phone, opening the photo of Madison's drawing. The three of them as a family, Jessica watching from the stars. I know what I need to do, Blake said. That night, he drove to the cemetery where Jessica was buried. He'd avoided coming here, afraid to face the magnitude of his loss, but now he needed to connect with her. Kneeling beside her grave, Blake spoke from his heart, telling her about Madison, her smile, her laughter, her strength so like her mother's. He spoke of his regrets, his anger at Harold's betrayal, his fear of losing Madison forever. I won't let him win, Blake promised. Not this time. I'll fight for her, not with money or power, but with the truth, with love, the way you would have. As dawn broke over the cemetery, Blake felt something he hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. Harold had taken his company, his reputation, even temporarily Madison's trust. But he couldn't take Blake's determination to be the father Jessica had believed he could be. Standing, Blake made a silent vow to the woman who had never stopped believing in him. He would reclaim what truly mattered, not his company, but his daughter's heart. Blake stared at the weathered oak door of the Parker residence, steeling himself for rejection. The evidence folder Rachel had assembled felt heavy in his hands. Truth, that could clear his name but might not heal the hurt he'd caused. Martha answered, her expression hardening instantly. I told you not to come. Please, Blake said quietly. 5 minutes. For Madison. Something in his voice must have reached her because Martha stepped aside reluctantly. The living room was silent except for the steady beep of medical equipment. Robert had been discharged but remained bedridden, an oxygen tube snaking across his weathered face. You shouldn't be here, Robert said, though without the anger Blake expected. Blake placed the folder on the coffee table. I didn't know about Jessica's pregnancy. These documents prove Harold intercepted her calls, returned her letters, fabricated that email. He's been manipulating all of us for years. Martha leafed through the papers, her hands trembling slightly. Even if this is true, it doesn't change what Madison's going through. She trusted you. I know, Blake acknowledged, and I'll spend the rest of my life earning that trust back if you'll let me see her. Robert and Martha exchanged glances. Finally, Robert nodded wearily. She's at Sarah's house, Jessica's friend, he said. She didn't want to stay here after everything. The understanding in Robert's eyes nearly broke Blake. The older man reached for his hand. Jessica would have fought for you, Robert said softly. Go fight for our girl. Sarah's apartment was small but warm, filled with photos of Jessica. She greeted Blake with cautious optimism. She's confused, Sarah warned. She thinks you lied about not knowing Jessica was pregnant. Madison sat on the couch, her small body rigid with hurt when she saw him. The wariness in her eyes, so like Jessica's, cut deeper than any business loss. Madison, Blake began, kneeling before her. I need to tell you something important. He explained in simple terms how Harold had kept him from knowing about her, showing her Jessica's unsent letters, the evidence Rachel had gathered. Most importantly, he showed her the memory box Jessica had created, proof of how much both her parents had wanted her. Your mom never stopped trying to reach me, Blake explained gently, and if I had known about you, nothing would have kept me away. Madison's expression remained guarded. Uncle Harold said you didn't want a kid. That's why you stayed away. Harold didn't tell the truth, Blake replied. I've made mistakes, but not loving you was never one of them. He pulled out a small box. Inside was the deed to his childhood home. I'm moving back here permanently, he explained. It's closer to your school has a big backyard. There's a room waiting just for you. Whenever you're ready. Madison's eyes widened slightly. What about your fancy apartment? Your company? They don't matter, Blake said simply. You do. The first crack in Madison's armor appeared, a tiny softening around her eyes. Can I think about it? She asked quietly. Take all the time you need, Blake assured her. I'm not going anywhere. Olivia was grading papers when Blake arrived at her classroom after school hours. I have evidence clearing my name, he said without preamble. Harold fabricated everything. She studied the documents carefully. I wanted to believe you, she admitted. Madison misses you. She keeps drawing pictures of you in art class. I've made mistakes, Blake acknowledged, putting work before relationships, letting Harold influence me. But loving Madison isn't one of them. Olivia's professional reserve melted slightly. The father-daughter dance is Friday. Maybe you could still come? Blake's lawyer reviewed the evidence against Harold with growing confidence. This is enough to remove him from the board and potentially file criminal charges, she explained. Several board members are already questioning Harold's leadership after the stock plummeted further this week. But Blake had stopped listening, his attention caught by a small detail in one document, a clause in his father's will that Harold had concealed. This says the company was always meant to establish a charitable foundation in my mother's name, Blake realized. The profits were supposed to help children who lost parents, just like Madison nearly lost both of us. The purpose his father had intended for the company, not wealth or power, but creating something meaningful, crystallized in Blake's mind. Later that day, he called a trusted board member. I need your help, Blake explained. Not to get my job back, but to honor what Anderson Enterprises was always meant to be. For the first time since finding Madison, Blake saw the complete picture, not just reclaiming what Harold had taken, but building something better for his daughter's future. The annual Anderson Enterprises Charity Gala gleamed with wealth and privilege. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light over the city's elite as they discussed business deals and summer homes. Blake adjusted his tie, feeling like an outsider. Despite having hosted this event for years, he wasn't CEO tonight, just a man with truth burning in his pocket and determination in his heart. Madison squeezed his hand. Are you scared, Dad? The word Dad still sent warmth through his chest every time she said it. The past 2 weeks had brought cautious reconciliation. Madison spending weekends at his childhood home, slowly rebuilding trust. A little, Blake admitted, but doing the right thing is more important than being scared. Olivia stood on Madison's other side, elegant in a simple blue dress. Her quiet support had become his anchor through the storm. Whatever happens, she whispered, we're with you. Harold held court at the center of the room, playing the benevolent leader. His smile faltered when he spotted Blake. You weren't invited, Harold said coldly, approaching them. Actually, I was, Blake replied. Several board members had privately expressed doubts about Harold's leadership, arranging Blake's invitation to gauge the situation. Harold's eyes narrowed at Madison. Using a child as a prop? New low, even for you. Madison stepped forward surprisingly. He's not using me. I wanted to come. Harold's face hardened. This is hardly appropriate for a child. Neither is lying to separate her from her father, Blake countered. The room quieted as tension crackled between them. Blake nodded to Rachel, who activated the presentation system. The massive screens displayed the evidence. Harold's intercepted. Communications, forged documents, financial manipulations. For 8 years, Blake addressed the stunned crowd. Harold Montgomery kept me from knowing I had a daughter. He intercepted Jessica Parker's messages, returned her letters, and hid the truth. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Harold's face flushed with fury. These documents prove he fabricated evidence to turn Madison's grandparents against me, Blake continued. He manipulated clients to leave the company, forcing the board to remove me. Board members exchanged troubled glances as Blake concluded, I'm not here to reclaim my position. I'm here because my father founded this company with a purpose Harold buried, To help children who lost parents like Madison nearly lost both of us. Harold lunged for the microphone. This is absurd. He's desperate. It's true, came a frail voice from the entrance. Robert Parker stood supported by Martha, his oxygen tank beside him. Their presence silenced the room completely. We've seen the evidence, Martha added. Harold lied to all of us. Harold's composure cracked entirely. This company is mine. I built it while William coddled his precious son. The naked resentment shocked the crowd. 3 board members immediately moved to Blake's side, symbolically shifting allegiance. Harold saw his empire crumbling. In desperation, he pulled Blake aside. Walk away now, he hissed. I'll reinstate you as CEO, give you controlling interest. Just drop this crusade and leave the girl with her grandparents where she belongs. Blake studied the man who had shaped his life. His mentor, his uncle, his betrayer. You still don't understand, Blake said quietly. I'm not choosing between Madison and the company. I'm choosing to be the man Jessica believed I could be, the father Madison deserves. Harold's expression darkened. You're making a mistake. No, Blake replied. That's what I did when I let you convince me success meant more than family. As Harold stormed out, Madison slipped her hand into Blake's. You chose me, she said, wonder in her voice. Every time, Blake promised, lifting her into his arms. The board chairman approached. Blake, we need to talk about the future of Anderson Enterprises. Blake nodded, but his focus remained on Madison's smile, the true measure of his success. The headlines declared victory. Anderson heir reclaims legacy. Family fraud exposed. CEO reinstated after uncle's deception revealed. But Blake knew better than to celebrate. Harold's humiliation made him dangerous, and Blake couldn't shake the feeling that the final battle was yet to come. His fears materialized 3 days after the gala. The Parker home was eerily quiet when Blake arrived for Madison's weekend visit. No Robert in his usual spot by the window. No Martha fussing in the kitchen. Hello? Blake called, unease crawling up his spine. A manila envelope sat on the coffee table with his name scrawled across it. Inside was a court order and a letter from Martha. We've taken Madison to our lake house. Harold's lawyers contacted us with evidence that your company's financial troubles could impact Madison's future. We need time to think. Please don't follow us. Blake's hands shook as he dialed their number. No answer. The lake house was 4 hours away, and they deliberately left without telling him. His lawyer's voice was grim when he called her. Harold moved fast. He's filed an emergency petition claiming your ability to provide for Madison is compromised. He's leveraged Robert's medical bills. Apparently, he's been secretly paying them, creating financial dependency. He can't take her, Blake whispered. There's more. The board meeting tomorrow? Harold's rallied minority shareholders. He's claiming your emotional instability threatens the company's recovery. He's offering to buy their shares at premium prices. Blake's world tilted sideways. After everything, the truth revealed Harold's deception exposed he was still at risk of losing both Madison and the company his father built. What do I do? Blake asked, desperation creeping into his voice. Choose, his lawyer said bluntly. Fight Harold for the company or fight for Madison. We don't have resources for both battles simultaneously. The choice that had once seemed so clear suddenly felt impossible. The company wasn't just wealth and power. It was his father's legacy, the source of security he wanted to provide for Madison, the foundation for the charitable work he'd planned. Blake drove to his childhood home, mind racing. Inside, Madison's drawings covered the refrigerator. Her favorite stuffed elephant waited on her bed. Evidence of the family they were becoming surrounded him. His phone rang. Olivia. The Parkers called the school, she said. They're withdrawing Madison temporarily. Blake, what's happening? Harold, Blake explained. One last move to destroy everything. After hanging up, Blake sat in his father's study, crushed by the weight of his impossible choice. Fight for the company that could secure Madison's future, or fight for custody of the daughter who had already lost so much. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Rachel entered, her expression grim. You need to see this, she said, placing a tablet before him. On screen was footage from the company's secure server, Harold with Jessica 8 years ago. The timestamp matched the period after she'd discovered her pregnancy. "If you pursue this, I'll destroy him," Harold told a tearful Jessica. "Blake will lose everything. His inheritance, his future. Is that what you want for your child's father?" Jessica's voice shook. "Blake deserves to know about his child." "Then you'll both suffer," Harold threatened. "Consider this my only warning." The footage cut off. Blake stared at the blank screen, ice flooding his veins. "Where did you get this?" "It found it hidden in encrypted files," Rachel replied. "Harold kept it as insurance, proof of his threat." Blake's grief hardened into resolve. This wasn't just about him or even Madison anymore. It was about justice for Jessica, who had tried to protect him while fighting for their child. His phone lit up with a text from Martha. "Madison keeps asking for you. She doesn't understand why we left." Another message followed. A photo of Madison, clutching the locket with Jessica's picture, tears streaming down her face. Blake stood, decision made. Harold had given him an impossible choice, forcing him to sacrifice either his daughter or his legacy. But perhaps there was another way, one that would require him to risk everything. Dawn broke over the cemetery, golden light filtering through, morning mist as Blake approached Jessica's grave. He wasn't surprised to find Harold already there, staring contemplatively at the headstone. "You knew I would come here," Blake said quietly. Harold didn't turn. "You always were predictable, sentimental like your father." Blake placed fresh flowers beside Jessica's name. "I've made my decision. I'm not fighting you for the company." Now Harold turned, triumph flickering across his face. "Finally showing some sense." "No," Blake corrected. "Finally showing some courage. I'm giving it all away." Harold's expression hardened. "What are you talking about?" "I've transferred my shares to the Jessica Parker Foundation, a charitable trust dedicated to supporting single parents and children who've lost a parent. The paperwork was filed last night." Harold's face paled. "You can't do that." "It's already done," Blake said. "The shares can never be sold or transferred, only used to fund the foundation's work. My father's original vision for the company, before you corrupted it." Harold lunged forward, grabbing Blake's lapels. "You've destroyed everything I built." "No," Blake said calmly, removing Harold's hands. "I've saved what matters. The board will never accept this." "They already have. 4 directors signed on as foundation trustees this morning." Rage twisted Harold's features. "And what about your precious daughter? How will you support her without the company?" "I don't need millions to be a good father," Blake replied. Jessica understood that. She knew what really mattered. The fight seemed to drain from Harold suddenly, leaving him looking old and defeated. "You've chosen a child over an empire. I've chosen love over power," Blake corrected. "Something you never understood." Harold scoffed. "And the Parkers? They've taken Madison away." "They're bringing her home today," Blake said. "Once they saw the video of you threatening Jessica, they understood everything. The court has already dismissed your petition." Harold's expression shifted to something Blake had never seen before: fear. "That video was private," Harold whispered. "Nothing stays hidden forever," Blake replied, "especially the truth." Harold glanced at Jessica's grave, then back to Blake. "What happens to me?" "That depends on you," Blake said. "Resign from the board, disappear quietly, and I won't press charges. Stay, and I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you did to Jessica, to Madison, to me." For a moment, Harold seemed ready to fight, but then his shoulders slumped. "You never understood," Harold said softly. "I did it all for the family name." "No," Blake contradicted. "You did it for yourself, and you sacrificed our family in the process." As Harold walked away, Blake turned back to Jessica's grave, placing his hand gently on the cool stone. "It's over," he whispered. "He can't hurt us anymore." A car approached on the cemetery path. Blake recognized the Parkers' old station wagon. Martha stepped out first, followed by Robert. moving slowly with his oxygen tank. Then, the back door opened, and Madison bounded out, running toward Blake, with tears streaming down her face. "Daddy!" she cried, throwing herself into his arms. Blake held her tightly, his own tears falling freely. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere." Over Madison's shoulder, he saw Olivia emerge from the car, smiling through her tears. Beyond her, the morning sun broke fully through the mist, illuminating Jessica's name on the granite stone. AI, silent witness to the family that had finally, after so many years, come together. 1 year later, Blake stood in the backyard of his childhood home, now transformed with bright flowers and a swing set. Laughter filled the air as Madison chased their new puppy Daisy across the freshly cut grass. The simple joy on his daughter's face was worth more than all the business deals he'd ever closed. "Need a hand with those?" Olivia asked, stepping onto the patio where Blake was arranging cupcakes for Madison's birthday party. "Please," he smiled, pulling her close for a quick kiss. Their relationship had blossomed naturally over the past year, built on shared devotion to Madison and quiet moments stolen between school runs and bedtime stories. "I can't believe she's 7 today," Blake marveled, watching Madison demonstrate to her grandparents how high she could swing. Robert and Martha Parker had become regular fixtures in their lives. Robert's health had improved remarkably once the stress of Harold's manipulations had lifted. Now they came for Sunday dinners and holiday celebrations, the past conflicts dissolving into genuine affection. "Jessica would be proud," Olivia said, softly, following his gaze. "Of both of you." Blake nodded, his hand instinctively touching the framed photo of Jessica that held a place of honor in their living room. They spoke of her often, keeping her memory alive for Madison through stories and traditions. The memory box Jessica had created had become a treasured ritual. Each birthday, Madison opened another letter from the mother she never knew. "Daddy, look," Madison called, pointing toward the driveway where Sarah was arriving with a large gift box. "Aunt Sarah's here!" Blake smiled at Madison's excitement. Sarah had become an honorary aunt, bridging Madison's past and present with stories about Jessica that kept her spirit alive in their home. The doorbell rang, and Blake excused himself to answer it. Rachel stood on the porch, now the executive director of the Jessica Parker Foundation. "Sorry I'm late," she said, handing him a brightly wrapped package. "Board meeting ran long. The new scholarship program is launching next month. 15 children who've lost parents will receive full college funding." Blake felt a familiar warmth spread through his chest. The foundation had grown beyond his wildest hopes, helping hundreds of families in its first year. Jessica's legacy lived on in ways he could never have imagined when he'd made that fateful decision to prioritize love over power. "Any word from Harold?" Rachel asked cautiously. Blake shook his head. His uncle had disappeared from public life after their confrontation, reportedly living abroad. The occasional postcard arrived for Madison. Tentative, awkward attempts at connection that Blake neither encouraged nor prevented. She deserved to make her own decisions about family when she was older. "Blake," Olivia called from the kitchen doorway. "It's time." Inside, they gathered around the dining table where a cake adorned with 7 candles awaited. Madison sat in the chair of honor, her eyes bright with excitement. Before lighting the candles, Blake handed her a small velvet box, another tradition they'd started. "This was your mother's," he explained as Madison revealed a delicate silver charm bracelet. "She wore it when she was your age." Madison fastened it carefully around her wrist next to the locket she never removed. "Do you think she can see us?" she asked, her voice small but steady. "I know she can," Blake assured her, emotion tightening his throat. After the candles were blown out and gifts unwrapped, Blake found a moment of quiet on the porch swing. Madison's laughter drifted from inside, where Olivia was helping her try on her new dress. The simple contentment of this moment, a happy child, a loving home, was everything. His phone buzzed with an email from the company board. Though no longer CEO, Blake remained connected to his father's legacy through the foundation. The company was thriving under new leadership, its charitable mission restored. The sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold as Blake reflected on the journey that had brought him here. 8 years lost with his daughter. Years he could never reclaim. Yet the future stretched before them, bright with promise. The screen door creaked as Madison stepped outside, sitting beside him on the swing. "I read Mom's birthday letter," she said, leaning against his side. "What did she write?" Blake asked, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "She said to remember that love is the most important thing. More important than money or being important." Madison looked up at him seriously. "Like what you did, right? Choosing me instead of your company?" Blake felt tears prick his eyes at her simple understanding of his most profound decision. "Exactly like that," he whispered. "I think she would be happy," Madison decided, her small fingers tracing the charm bracelet. "We made the family she wanted." Blake pressed a kiss to the top of her head, his heart full beyond measure. Jessica had known what mattered long before he did, but he'd finally learned the lesson she'd tried to teach him, that no success was worth sacrificing the people you love. As the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, Blake and Madison sat together, gently swinging. Not the family he'd once imagined, but the one he was meant to have all along.